Okay, so have you seen the new Captain America trailer?
That's the one where Tommy Lee Jones is like yelling at him.
Mm-hmm.
Funny story about that. So the thing I subscribe to a YouTube channel that does a bunch of commercials in English, and then every once in a while will do a commercial in German. I don't know why, and they don't really indicate which is which. It is a surreal experience to watch a Captain America trailer where he's getting ready to fight in World War II. All of the Americans are speaking German. It really threw me for a loop, but I eventually found the one in English on Marvel.
What did you think of the trailer?
I love it as Tommy Lee Jones, because although not one of my man crushes, I love to see him in movies, because he does play a good rough guy. It was kind of cool. The whole time I saw, when they was like talking about how tiny he was, all I could think is, I could think of his name when I was watching, I can't think of it now. He was a film star back in the 1950s, and he actually fought in World War II, and he was super tiny. He did a movie.
That he actually had to tone down the shit he did in real life.
Yeah, because he was like, oh yeah, no, if I actually made a movie about what I actually did in the war, no one would believe me. And so I have to cut back how awesome I am to get people to believe me in Hollywood. Just post whatever his name is, I guess, afterwards. I feel bad not knowing it. Because this is the thing, the whole time going through the trailer, I was like, oh cool, we'll have to talk about this in a future episode, and I'll have to bring this guy up. And it's like, oh wait, no, there goes his name. So, whatever.
Maybe I can avoid all of it by shittily dubbing it in. Shitty doubling his name.
Yeah.
John Smith.
We should do that with more things. You should just correct me every time I'm wrong with a dub, and then it'll be fine. Like, no one will ever notice it. I think our voices are similar enough. You could do it.
Oh yeah, they're completely similar.
But yeah, no, I love the trailer. Like, it's got me excited for it. There's a couple of things in there. I've noticed I've become a lot more cynical about trailers, and so anytime there's anything that has, like, the slightest bit of cheese to it, I'm always like, oh gosh, this movie's gonna be terrible. It's gonna be a bunch of cheesy jokes. Like with the shield thing. Oh, how does it look? Or how does it work? Or whatever. And shoots at him. Oh, it worked. Really? If I was Captain America, did you shoot at me? Did you shoot at me? What is your problem? What if I hadn't had the foresight to lift up the shield? You'd have just put a bullet in my chest, you whore.
You've killed America's only chance.
Exactly. It's like, what are you thinking? What in your mind said, you know what would be a great idea? I'm just going to pull a gun on this dude and hope everything turns out okay.
The first thing I noticed when I was watching the trailer is seeing Chris Evans, the pre-Captain America Chris Evans, walk around and how he's really short and really skinny. I was thinking, wow, those effects are not gonna hold up.
Yeah, they need to make him tall soon.
Just seeing how tiny he was, I was like, I really hope that's not in the movie a whole lot, because 10 years from now, I don't know if people are going to be able to watch that without laughing.
Yeah, Marvel's been pretty good about that. In that, the thing is, there's a lot of effects-driven features that look absolutely terrible today, but were just marvels in their time. And then there's movies that were like, hey, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do. Why don't we just do what we can do? And then it may not be pushing the envelope right now, but it'll look good, at least, in a couple years. Star Wars is 30 years old now, so of course, it's definitely aged,
yep.
But he could have done a lot more stuff, like tried to do like all these different effects, but he kept it to what he could do. Like, he didn't add anything digital in back then. You know, it was all models and stuff like that. Why? So it actually looked good in 30 years too, and not just then. Because Star Wars is a effects-driven flick that 30 years later still looks like just a lower budget events-driven flick instead of most of effects-driven flicks like Tron that look like a big old turd 30 years later. But yeah, so I agree that they either better not use that a lot or make it look a lot better in the actual movie.
Kind of thought the same thing when I was looking at the Green Lantern trailer. Oh, that looks pretty cool now. Again, not it's gonna look so well when I'm watching the movie when I'm 30.
Yeah, if only they could figure out the sweet spot there, because they're usually pretty bad at that.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's difficult to tell what's gonna look good in the distance, but I think just, like, scaling it down and not using gimmick effects, like, oh look, we're gonna make him look like he's a midget, like he's super duper tiny. You know, it's almost like they're at one point gonna have him sing the Munchkin song, because they really play up the fact that he's small. Whereas if they just did, like, some tiny little things, it'd be a lot better.
Yeah, it just kind of reminds me of on Smallville how the guy playing Clark, Tom Welling, is like 6'4", 6'5". Kristen Crook, the one that played his girlfriend in the show, I'm not even going to try to remember how tall she was, because I never cared to learn. But obviously, there's a big height difference between them, but they used a lot of practical effects on the show, like shooting from the waist up, and she was on a footstool, and he was in a trough that they dug in the dirt.
That is great. I realize they've done that. That is fantastic. I love it when they do stuff like that.
They could have done more stuff like that. I would have liked to have seen a bit more practical effects rather than digital, because I think, like you said before, like with Star Wars, they tend to hold up a bit better.
That's the thing. That's the director's prerogative. prerogative to shoot the scene in such a way that he can look tiny. I mean, there are incredible things you can do with perspective. I mean, even if it's just doing like a direct 90-degree angle shot from like the side and putting him in the distance a little bit further.
I mean, watch an old episode of Power Rangers. You'll see a lot of that.
Exactly. And that holds up forever because no matter how far in the future you get, unless you get super robot eyes that can do magic or change the way we perceive the universe entirely, which guess what? Then all special effects are going to look like shit.
Yeah.
But unless we get super special eyes sometime in the near future, he will always look short and it will always look realistic because it will use the same trick of perspective that people at carnivals have been using for thousands of years to astound the viewer.
And cheat you out of games.